Yeah, the thing about project management, I think a lot of times people focus on the hard skills, and there are definitely some hard skills in terms of understanding terminology, being able to do things like schedule or budget a project and that kind of thing. I think one of the things that surprises people is those soft skills are actually probably even more important. Number one being communication. Come up with your story, tell everyone you know, and then definitely join PMI. And the reason is not just to sell an organization, but the thing about PMI, it's a community of people who all support each other in project management. And this is how you find out about opportunities.
That even in companies, there are different departments, legal, marketing, and if you have those backgrounds, if you come from those backgrounds, you may not have project management. But as per your example, if you have come from a legal background, you can look for project management opportunities even in tech companies, because all companies have a legal department.
Absolutely.
Hello and welcome to Mentorship Masterminds, the PMI podcast where we deep dive into the world of leadership, networking, and professional development. I'm your host Mahesh Deshpande, and I'm thrilled to bring another captivating episode where we will be discussing transformational topics that are insightful and that are instrumental in shaping our next generation leaders. In each episode, I will be interviewing our industry leaders or seasoned mentors who have carved a niche for themselves in the annals of leadership and innovation. I'll dig deep into their experience, unravel some of the stories that have shaped their ideas, learn from their success stories, and learn something new from our masterminds. We are recording this podcast on the vibrant campus of Golden Gate University in the heart of San Francisco City, a city synonymous with pushing boundaries and breaking the mold. And that's exactly the spirit that fuels our podcast. In today's episode, we are talking about pivoting your career into project management. And to discuss this topic with us, we have Marie Spark. Marie, welcome to Mentorship Masterminds podcast.
Really glad to be here, Mahesh.
So, Marie, you have worked a lot with educators as well as students and professionals into project management. You have worked across industries. But in your bio, you mentioned that you are an accidental project manager. Can you share your experience of how you got into the field of project management?
Yes, and I really love telling my story because I think it's very encouraging to people who are pivoting their careers, because I was absolutely an accidental project manager. I mean, when I was growing up, there was no field of project management. It was not a field of study. And I always felt like a little bit of a misfit because growing up, I loved writing and I was very creative and into art, but I also would really nerd out on math and details. So who did that? Like, it never seemed to map to anyone or anything that I knew to study. So in college, I was a rhetoric major with a French minor, and I fell in love with journalism. So I was going to be a journalist. That was my big deal. I got an internship at a certain national public radio network you might have heard of in Washington, D.C., which was really exciting, and I loved it. What I didn't realize, it was really my first project management job, because what they had me do was coordinate interviews. You know, Marie, we need you to contact someone to set up an interview, and then we had to schedule it, make sure they knew which station to go to and that the studio time was available. Anyway, I hit a dead end with journalism because it's a very hard field to break into. Ended up going back to business school, which got in touch with my nerdy side. And then in business school, I discovered this thing called project management, which just mapped to everything I loved. And it was buried inside my operations management class. It was not a topic on its own. But because of that, I started talking to recruiters, and I ended up landing a job with IBM Global Services. And that is how I got into project management.
That's an interesting story, and I'm sure our audience who are listening to this podcast and are interested in pivoting their career, the story is inspiring. So, Marie, today we are talking about pivoting into project management, and there are a lot of questions, and we'll get into the nuances in our later questions, but there is project management, program management, and product management, and these are used interchangeably, and there is a lot of confusion amongst these terminologies. For our audience who are trying to pivot into project management, to help set the stage, can you differentiate between these three roles?
Mahesh, absolutely. And I'm really glad we're having this conversation because there is a lot of confusion. And just for the audience out there, not only is there confusion among the general public, but there's actually a lot of confusion among hiring managers, recruiters, and other people who throw these words around and they don't understand what they are. And there's a real difference in the roles in terms of product management, project management, and I'll throw in Agile. And give a little bit of background of the history of project management. Project management as a field has only been around about 50 or so years, a little longer. PMI has only been around for 50 years. That's created the standards for project management. And that is the general field. That is the saying, putting down a line in the sand and saying, we are going to manage projects as a profession. Program management is an important part of that. Programs are, a program is a set of projects that are managed at a higher level. And this is how companies view projects. If you're Apple and you have operating system upgrades every month, you don't treat those as separate projects. You have a program overall with release management where you manage those. So program management and a program manager is someone who oversees projects at a higher level. They're not so much at the detail, but they have to have the bigger picture and they need to manage the projects underneath at a higher level. Product management is an interesting combination. It's a sort of newer role. It used to be that the project manager was purely execution-based. A project manager was handed a project and needed to make it happen. With faster business cycles, it's become more important that project managers are customer-focused, understand the sales and branding. So this new role came about. It's really growing where the product manager has the hat of being customer-focused, product-focused, sales-focused, but also having the project management skills. So it's really a combination. I'll throw in Agile. Agile used to be kind of treated separately. Waterfall is the traditional, or plan-driven is the traditional set of way projects are managed, and that was when you have a defined outcome. Like I'm building a bridge. I know exactly how it's going to come out. Well, when you're developing software, you don't know everything that's going to come out. And if you treat it that way, it's not going to work very well. That's what Agile is a method to create some sort of structure within the innovation. But Agile is now part of project management, and if you're out there in the workforce, most likely you're going to be having to use a combination of probably all these things we're talking about. But it is good to understand how they're different.
Absolutely, that helps clarify. So product manager comes before and has some niche skills, has to understand about the customer, but a project manager should, if wants to get into product, needs to understand those aspects as well before getting into and applying for those roles. We'll come to the application and those processes.
Yes.
I want to talk about a recent surge which we see in the field and a spiked interest in the field of project management. You are an educator here with the Golden Gate University. You see veterans, you see international students, as well as mid-career professionals trying to get into project management and trying to either project or management or even program management for that matter. What's your take on this? Like, what's causing this spike, this surge in interest in project management field?
Excellent question, and I would just say the surge isn't really new. It's been going back for a long time. So again, so get back to the long history. So I don't want to date myself, but I'll just tell a little bit about when I was involved in project management. Early on, I was involved with Y2K, so that gives you an idea. But when I started as a project manager, it was kind of a niche thing. When I got my PMP, a few people in my technology group, I was in IT, were interested, and what I began finding as the years went along, more and more people came to me, hey Marie, you have a PMP, tell me about it. So the thing is, project management has grown as a field as business, the need has grown because I like to talk about the death of the operational job. Now, when I started out on IT in the mid-90s, and you think about Y2K, there were people who had the same IT job for 20 years with those old legacy systems. Who has a job like that anymore? No one. Most of us in our jobs have some projects that we're having to manage. So first of all, there's just more and more people who are realizing, hey, I'm a manager, but I'm getting thrown projects and I don't have the skills to do it. So that's one thing. The other thing is PMI actually does a study every year across industries about project management, and they've had a study that they've been started doing the last few years called the job skills gap. Because what they're finding is the need that employers have for people with project management skills is not being met in the marketplace. So some of this surge is coming from employers themselves because people either realize, if I want to get a job in my industry, I need those skills, or else if I want to get a promotion, I need those skills. The other part, though, we're probably going to get into international students and veterans. There's been a tremendous increase in veterans generally coming back with the GI Bill, looking for project management jobs. This is because of recognition that they have those skills in the military, but they're not necessarily, they just need to rebrand. The US government actually made it an official career track and now requires PMP certifications for government contracts. A lot of military people go into the government. So that's one surge. And then the other surge is international students. A couple things going on there. One is IT project management is now designated as a STEM degree. This means if I'm an international student, I have additional time, actually 3 years as opposed to 1, that I can stay in this country to work without a work permit. That's huge. It's also a great avenue for people like myself. So as I was mentioning, I had a rhetoric background and I was not an engineer. I had an MBA with IT management. I was able to get a job in technology as a project manager with that background. So a lot of international students who want to get into tech, want to get in a technical role, but it was too hard to be in, they started out in computer science or something else and it just didn't work for them. Project management is a great avenue in.
Awesome. You brought some old memories from Y2K.
Yes.
I'm not sure
I'm sure some of our audience just read about it and the rest of us did live through it.
So let's deep dive on the international students. You talked about STEM and what excites them, and even engineers who might probably want to not do coding or who might not get into core technology. Project management is an aspect. Right. So, do you see any pattern in how international students are approaching project management from a master's degree or from
Sure.
a bachelor's degree?
So it's interesting. So there are different. There's some different patterns. So you were mentioning an engineer. There's definitely people who started out technical, started as coding engineers, and a lot of times they get thrown into these tech lead roles. A lot of my friends when I was in IT had that, where suddenly they're thrown into a lead role, but they're not given the skills to really be successful, because so much of being project management successful in project management is communication skills, leadership skills. If I'm an engineer and all of a sudden I'm thrown in this role, I don't know how to lead. I don't know how to manage. So that's one, and that's definitely a very big angle. There's also a lot of international students, though, coming from very other backgrounds. I have international students coming from fields like marketing, fields like event planning, fields like consulting. Where they see this as a way, in the US, there's a different approach towards project management and leadership. They see that they have a lot more autonomy in this country. A lot of other cultures are much more top-down. So if I'm a young person, I have to follow a lot of orders. In the US, if you're a project manager, you have a lot of autonomy. And I've seen some real success stories of students who've just blossomed here because the U.S. affords some of those different kinds of opportunity. I'll just give an example of someone in marketing. So Lorena Depeditis, shout out to Lorena, who is now a PMI region mentor. She had 20 years of graphic design experience, came to the U.S., started out as a PMI volunteer, except for the chapter, ended up being the marketing director for the chapter, and ended up actually landing a job at the Golden Gate University marketing department, where she's really thriving as a marketing project manager. And so that's an example of someone who does not have a tech background and has ended up being very successful. Likewise, I definitely have students who succeeded and gotten internships and jobs at places like at tech companies as well.
Yeah, these are great insights. And Lorena is awesome. I worked with her, with the PMI chapter, of course, and she's amazing. And your story resonates with most of our audience when we talk about international students getting into project management as a field of expertise. So let's switch gears, and I want to talk to you about few aspects of project management where, say, somebody is now convinced and they have decided to pursue the path of project management, come from a different background, I want to pivot into project management. What are some of from a planning perspective, right? What are some of the do's and don'ts? How can someone plan and before getting into project management? How can someone plan and decide, like, well, how do I strategize to get into this field?
Great question, and I love that you asked about planning, because project managers are planners. So the number one thing I would say, and we're making this a little joke, but the number one thing I'd say is you should figure out whether it's the field for you. One of the best things is to either talk to people in the field, get involved with PMI, do some sort of self-study, because the number one thing is project management is exciting, but it's not for everybody. So one of the things is because there's stress, there's a lot on your shoulders. It's you're solving a lot of complex problems, and there's a lot of responsibility. And so figure out if it's for you first. I'll just tell one of my biggest success stories was a student who came to me at the end of the semester and said, you know what, professor, this is not the field for me. Loved your class, but I'm not a project manager. So not to scare anyone away, but that's the first thing. The second thing is you should really look at what the jobs are out there and what your strengths are and do kind of an assessment. I think a lot of people want to jump into certification, but one of the things to figure out, like let's say my background is in advertising, or like for instance, I'll give you Lorena because she was in marketing. Marketing is very project based. So the thing is when you have whatever the background is, look for what are the jobs that leverage the current skills you have. What certifications are they looking for? What kind of experience are they looking for? That's how you pivot. You pivot by figuring out your transferable skills, also rebranding yourself and telling a different story about your skills. So that's one of the things I find challenging with sometimes students who are changing careers because their resume reads like what they did. The resume should read like what you want to do. Give an example of a student who had been a paralegal. Her resume was all legal. But if you've been a paralegal, you've met deadlines, you've worked with difficult clients, you have managed a lot of stressful situations. So I worked with the student in the Career Center to rebrand her resume so it really highlighted her amazing project management skills, and also having a legal background is perfect for like compliance and legal within the companies. So, anyway, those are some things. I would just also say that the first thing people usually ask me is about certification. Yeah. And certification has its place. But certification is only good if it's going to meet your goals. So the other thing is when people say, Professor, should I get a certification? Or I get asked a lot. I say, first of all, look for the jobs you're looking for immediately. Do they require that? Or is there some other skill that you might be looking for, that they're looking for that you might obtain? I do feel like certification is really valuable, specifically if you're someone who has a lot of project experience that's not labeled that way. So for instance, with military veterans or people in a field like, again, advertising, architecture, something where they did not have the title of project management. If you're just starting out though, maybe getting certification is not necessarily the best first step.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think you make a good point that even in companies there are different departments, legal, marketing, and if you have those backgrounds, if you come from those backgrounds, you may not have project management. But as per your example, if you have come from a legal background, you can look for project management opportunities even in tech companies, because all companies have a legal department.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that where people struggle with finding a project management job, project management is a set of tools. It's like a toolkit. It's like everybody knows that if it's like I can't think of another example, but the thing that makes it unique, I think, is that it applies to a field or industry. So we all have backgrounds, and the thing is you need to figure out what is the background that makes me best suited to this kind of company. Because if I just go, I'm looking for project management, right, there's project management in every single company. But giving examples of, I had a student who was at a company. He was an executive assistant, had really great organizational skills at this tech company. And through being in my program and building the skills, he actually moved within that company to the corporate real estate. And now he's involved in, he just actually announced on LinkedIn that he was involved in opening a new headquarters or new office for the company. So the point being that he was in the tech field and he was able to promote himself within that field within the same company, but he was able to transition to a different role. So, I think people have a hard time. So my suggestion would be, when you're trying to figure this out, either think, if you're new and you're just starting out, find a field you're passionate about and do research on it and figure out how you want to go there. But if you already are in a field, don't just jump into a new field. Figure out, is there something I already know how to do that is at company? So law is a really great Law is a really great example because so many people have like a law background. Every company has a legal department or a compliance department or something like that. Anyway, those are just some things. There is no one rule. Sometimes people ask, like, what is the rule or what is the, and there's a lot of different paths.
Absolutely. So we spoke about certifications and different pathways, right? When it comes to project management and when somebody is planning to pivot into project management, there are a lot of pathways. You spoke about certifications. There are even certifications, there are Agile certifications, there is PMP certification, there is disciplined Agile from PMI, there is scaled Agile. But at the same time, there are also courses. There are certification courses in project management, and there are graduate courses like the ones that you lead in at Golden Gate University. So when somebody is planning, right, based on their personas, what are the different pathways? Can you talk about, like, should people directly go for a graduate program or approach a certificate? Can you touch base on those? You spoke about certificates, but
Sure.
when we look at all a breadth of avenues, what's your take on these pathways?
Excellent. And this is a question I get asked a lot because it is really confusing. It's complicated, and I would certainly help clarify for those of you out there. Because I think the thing is we all have to understand what places these different kinds of training or education have. Certification works best for, so like the PMP, which is really for experienced people, that really helps brand you as an experienced project manager to say, hey, this person is verified as being someone with experience. Because there's some people out there mid-career, they never got the PMP, suddenly they're in the job market and they don't have it. Well, you need to have it. Now, if you're someone who has less experience, the CAPM might be a consideration, which is the Certified Associate in Project Management for people who don't have the experience, but it also might be Agile. You know, where it gets a little stickier in terms of do you need to have it, it depends on do you have relevant other experience that you can showcase. Employers haven't yet quite figured out about the CAPM yet, so don't assume, oh, I have the CAPM, therefore employers will find me. They don't necessarily understand about it. So again, it really is branding yourself. But I do think the value of the CAPM or any Agile certification is it gives you the language and understanding and context. Because when employers are interviewing you or looking for someone, even if it's someone's junior, they want to know that that person understands the life cycle of project management, the context, the world of project management. Then if you're mid-career, those of us like myself where though Agile wasn't around when I started out, then it's really important to have Agile in some way. Jury's out as to which certification. I don't think there's any one, but I think it's important to have some training, certification, and knowledge so that, like, you know, I have a CSM and I did that because I needed to have something to validate and also learn because we should always be in learning mode. The final thing I would say is beyond certifications, I think the thing that a lot of times gets people that first job is some sort of technical training. And again, it depends on the industry. But looking at the jobs that you're interested in and the field you're interested in, is there training that might get you that first job? Because sometimes it's like learning software that might get your first job. So for instance, I'm in higher education. Salesforce is a big tool within higher education. So one path might be, I'm going to get a sort of Salesforce badging, there's a lot of trailheads you can do, there's Salesforce administration, because maybe that would get me my first job. So again, I'll say with certification, any of those things, they take time, they cost money, it's an investment. Like any investment, you should figure out what is it going to get me. In terms of education, like what we offer at GGU and graduate business education, and I would say not even just graduate project management education, but leadership or MBA, what that provides is really those leadership and analytical skills and the confidence to be able to be a leader. And where I've seen students be really successful in all the GGU programs and elsewhere in graduate programs is it gives them that confidence, and also their employers start seeing that they have these tools to lead. Because I would just say, I think one of the things that people forget when they focus on certification is being a project manager. In that role, you're a leader, there's a lot of pressure on, you need to manage up as well as manage people, and that you're not going to just get from taking a test.
That's true. This is golden. These are golden nuggets of wisdom. I'm sure our audience are going to appreciate this. You spoke about tools. Are there any tools that you recommend that people, aspiring project
Love you
managers?
asked that question. Okay, so the number one tool is right here. It's your brain. And you're laughing, but I think that the number one tool is the project management mindset. And thinking like a project manager, being proactive, being organized, collaborative thinking, communication. That being said, I think people focus too much on tools as if like some piece of software is going to answer everybody's questions. I mean, as an educator, there are people at the GGU staff who sometimes come to me because they're trying to use MS Project for something and it's not the right tool and they're getting lost. So I do think that, not to make light of tools, I think that if you're new to the field, you should learn about some basic project tool, whether it's MS Project or Asana, understand how it works, and you can even go to YouTube. You can go to, there's free classes in different ways. The number one thing when you're interviewing, they're not going to expect you to know every tool, but you do need to understand how to use project software. But as far as being a project manager, again, the number one thing is having the mindset, being organized, having the qualities, because we've all seen in companies that just the idea of like, oh, it's just going to be this one tool that's the answer. None of us as project managers would have our job if it was so simple as a tool.
Love it. The mindset, the project mindset is the most important tool. Because tools keep changing, technical tools keep changing. I think having a project mindset goes a long way.
And I would just say, also though, there are some simple tools, but they're simple. Things like a project charter, things like an issue log. If you've learned some of those things, those are great. I'll just give an example at GGU. I was on a project with my fellow faculty members, and it was all over the place. We had meetings every week. Issues weren't getting managed, and it would just keep bubbling up. And so finally, I took the executive assistant aside, and I said, look, let's set up an issue log. We went through everything, set up an issue log. The first day we ran the meeting, someone said, wow, this meeting runs itself. We actually, they were updating issues, and then everybody was amazed. It was a simple Excel table. So I think for those of you out there who are, I wanted to also build confidence, because if you're someone out there and you know about tools like a project charter or some of these things, sometimes inserting yourself in the workplace, you're showing your value with something very simple. It does not have to be something complex.
Absolutely. Marie, we spoke about the importance of having a project mindset as the most valuable tool. What are some of the soft skills that one needs to focus on when pivoting into project management?
Great question. Yeah, the thing about project management, I think a lot of times people focus on the hard skills, and there are definitely some hard skills in terms of understanding terminology, being able to do things like schedule or budget a project and that kind of thing. I think one of the things that surprises people is those soft skills are actually probably even more important. Number one being communication. And so, PMI says that 90% of project managers' job is in communication. And it sounds like a lot, except when you think about it, you need to be the glue that holds the project together. So it has to do with having really great soft skills in terms of communicating both up to management and down to to your peers and also to your team, collaborative problem solving to get to figure out how to resolve issues and come through with projects, but also reporting up to management and stakeholders. One of the things I find with students and people new to the profession, they do tend to be very organized, very detail-oriented. Where they struggle is you need to speak the language of the other people in the room. People like the sponsors and the stakeholders, they don't really want to see the details. They want to know what it matters to them. Is there actions they need to take? Are there things they should be excited about in terms of the big picture? They want the big picture view, and they want to be able to do things hear about things that are actionable. So I think those are some of the key skills. I do think for someone starting out, really understanding the terminology of the project environment is really important. And then the other thing, as I was saying earlier, is figuring out where is your strong suit in terms of industry or background, like whether it's marketing, higher education, what is it you bring that you're going to apply those project skills to?
Yeah, you should be able to play to your strengths and speak the language of your audience.
Absolutely. Like I came from banking, so I came from investment banking, technology, and operations. The language and terminology that I use is very specific to banking. A lot of times people say, oh, I'm having a really hard time getting into banking. That's where, someone wanting to go into banking project management, you need to understand the language of banking and the terminology in addition to the project environment.
Perfect. So let's deep dive onto this question on skills, right? When it comes to job search for people who are pivoting into a new into project management from a different profession, it's very it's not easy, and it's challenging environment. So what do they focus on, right? Like you spoke about transferable skills, you talk about soft skills as well as having a project mindset. But when it comes to job search, approaching job search, right, getting your first foot in the door for becoming a project manager, how should our audience of folks who are trying to pivot into project management, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you recommend?
Sure, and it is tricky, and I just want to acknowledge it's a tough job search out there, but it is doable, and it's different than so for instance, at GGU we have an accounting program. If you're going into being a CPA, it's pretty straightforward. You look for CPA jobs. The challenging part of project management is multi-layered. One is the job search is so automated now with automated screening, and yet so much of what we're seeing that makes you a great project manager may be soft skills, or you may have a very varied background. We all tend to be generalists, so we don't have those hard, specific skills that are easily searchable. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is there isn't a single pathway. There's so many different ways of going into project management. So again, not like the CPA, I started out as a junior accountant and worked myself way up. So there isn't that one path. The other thing that's going on is there isn't any one job title. Job titles keep changing. So back when I started out, there was a lot of project manager jobs, and if you were starting out, things like junior project manager, project coordinator. What I am seeing in the marketplace is there's a ton of jobs out there that are not called project management that are project manager jobs. And what my colleagues tell me is when they're looking for jobs, they actually don't look for project manager jobs. What they look for is jobs that fit the skill set that they match. So I'll give you some examples of job titles that are really project management job titles. We mentioned product manager. There's customer success manager, which is really a project management sales. There's release manager, implementation manager, TPM or technical program manager. So I think that's one of the things that makes the job search challenging. I think the other thing is if you're looking to start out to work with project managers are very busy people. What that means is when they're hiring someone, they want to know that that person is someone they can work with. It's more about the people part. If they put a job posting for a junior project manager and they get 1,000 applications, chances are they may get someone that's not going to work out and it'll be a waste of their time. This is where I 100% say that project management is the hidden job market, and the best way to get your foot in the door is to, surprise, surprise, join PMI or some other group and meet other project managers and get to know them. Because I know for me, even in higher education, I do hire every once in a while. And I want to know that the person that I'm hiring is someone I can work with. Because if I hire them blindly from an application process and we don't get along, we don't work well together, it's not going to work out. So I would just say the job search, go the old-fashioned route and connect with people and definitely join PMI.
Thank you, Marie. I think this is a valuable advice. We have another episode we are recording with Karen on the similar topic of powering up your social capital and how to network, and some of the she's talking
and Karen's
about,
great at that.
Yeah,
yep.
So she's going to talk about those skills as well. So tune into that podcast episode as well. So job skills and soft skills, these are important. And you spoke about communication and networking. How about mentoring? Like, do you think joining mentoring programs or having someone as a mentor helps in pivoting into project management? And a second question to that is like, how does one go about finding a mentor?
Excellent. I'm so glad you asked that because I get asked all the time. You know, I am a mentor to my students, and I get asked by other people to be a mentor, and I wish I could mentor everybody, but it's difficult. But I would just say mentoring is hugely invaluable. I have had mentors throughout my career who've made a difference. I still have mentors. So no matter where you are in your career, you should find mentors. And one of the things I think that makes this particularly challenging and why it's so important, like that the PMI chapter has a mentoring program, is back in the dinosaur days when I started out in the mid-90s, I worked for big companies. So I worked at IBM and I worked at Bank of America, and I had amazing mentors because I worked with people who had 10, 20, 30 years of experience. who I shadowed. So like when I got my job at Bank of America, I was hired by this wonderful person who, she said, Marie, you know nothing about banking and you're new to project management, but I know that you're smart and you'll catch on and you just follow me around and you'll learn. And that is how I learned. Well, how many of us have this experience anymore? No one, because companies keep changing. Everything's a startup. Or even if you're at a company that's been around, everyone's in flux. And even the people who are senior are doing something they've never done before. So definitely something like the chapter's formal mentoring program is great. There are other ways to find mentoring. So one might be doing an educational program like at GDU. But the other thing is look around you. Is there someone doing a job that you think, I'd like to do that job? You know, buy that person a cup of coffee or just say, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Could I shadow you? A lot of times people are really flattered to be asked and just start it that way. And so much of a mentoring, it's any relationship, it's just making a connection. What I find when I mentor, so for those of you who are PMP, you get P to use for mentoring. But the other thing is when you're mentoring someone else, you benefit. So if you look at it as a synergistic relationship, you know, you might feel shy about it, but a lot of times people are flattered to be asked, and it can be a really great thing for both of you. So definitely look for formally mentoring, but also just look around you. Who is it out there who can be mentors? And also, again, for those, we're talking about people pivoting. Look for people on LinkedIn, for instance, or through your network who have a job that you're just like, wow, that sounds like my dream job. Reach out to that person and say, you know, could I buy you a cup of coffee? I'd love to hear about what you do. And a lot of times people say yes. And that may or may not lead to a long-term mentoring, but sometimes even those one-off mentors are really great. I'll just give a little example from my own experience. So at one point before I became a project manager or pivoted, I was thinking about going into public relations. And I ended up talking to a lot of people in public relations. The person that stood out to me is I talked to this one fellow and he said, you know, Marie, the thing you have to understand about public relations is if you're in the public relations department, you're not in the part of the company that drives the business. You're always the last hired and the first fired, and you're sort of really out of what the company does. And that stuck with me, and that was like one of the key things that made me realize, you know, this is just not for me at all.
So Marie Spark wouldn't be today's Marie Spark without a mentor?
Definitely not. I mean, I might have been in public relations at GDU, who knows?
That's golden. So Marie, we are coming to the end of the podcast. I have last two questions, specific questions. Number one, I know people who are pivoting into project management from media, from education industry, are trying their best to get their foot in the door. Do you have a message for them when they're searching for a job, like what they can do, how can they get into project management? If you have any specific direct message to them, if you'd like to say anything.
Excellent. Well, when we talked about mentoring, which was going to be one of the things I was going to say, but beyond that, I think one of the things I'd like to say is we're all project managers as we go through life. So, you know, for instance, in your life, maybe you planned your kid's soccer tournament, or, you know, you planned a big family reunion, or you might have done something else. So I think the thing is to grab onto those things and figure out that elevator pitch to tell other people how you're a project manager, and use that project management language. And don't be shy. Tell everybody you meet, whether it's in church, in school, at your kid's soccer game, on LinkedIn. Tell people that that's what you want to do. I mean, I'll tell a little story, which is I wouldn't be sitting in this seat here as a professor at Golden Gate University if it wasn't for that. Oh, the other thing is join PMI. So those two things, me telling everybody what I wanted to do and joining PMI. So I had my PMP when I ended up being cut loose from Bank of America. I call it the Bank of America sabbatical plan in 2012. I was trying to figure out what to do next, and I decided, I went to a PMI meeting because I had my PMP, and I was inspired by someone who spoke that she did PMP training, and I said, you know what, I'd like to do that. So everybody I met, I would say, I was a volunteer leader, and I had a lot of volunteers, and I would say, you know, came out of banking, but I want to pivot into teaching. That's what landed me my very first teaching job at another school. But eventually, I ended up meeting Dr. Judy Lee, who I now work with, and this was because she was the host of the Breakfast Roundtable at the time, and then we were talking, and she said, have you ever thought about teaching? And I said, well, actually, and I gave him a little elevator pitch, make a very long story short, that is how I'm in the seat right now. So come up with your story, tell everyone you know, and then definitely join PMI. And the reason is not just to sell an organization, but the thing about PMI, it's a community of people who all support each other in project management. And this is how you find out about opportunities and also learn, gain experience. Also, it'll just make you find community and feel better about the whole thing, because I think a lot of finding a job is the self-confidence. And I think when you network with other project managers, you start learning about what you have to offer. And I hope that our audience finds some inspiration today.
Maria, I think these are really great insights and actionable insights which our audience can take while they are pivoting into project management. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. These were some really great insights, and I learned something new, as well as I'm sure people who are pivoting into project management. These are golden nuggets. Focus on all the insights that Maria has shared. Thank you so much once again for being on the podcast. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Mahesh. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Mentorship Masterminds. Stay tuned for more episodes where we will be talking about empathetic leadership, powering up your social capital, and similar interesting topics. Until then, signing off, your host, Mahesh Deshpande. Keep thriving and keep inspiring.